I never thought a single text message could unravel 23 years of marriage. But that Thursday night standing in my own kitchen, I learned just how quiet betrayal can be until it isn't. My name is Maren Whitlock. I'm 47, a mother, a wife who believed in the life we built in suburban Michigan. Until the phone lit up. Until she showed up at my door. This is the story of how I stayed calm while everything burned, and how I made sure the truth burned brighter. I was wiping down the counter when it happened. The kitchen smelled of roasted chicken and lemon cleaner the way it always did on Thursday nights. Upstairs, the shower ran steadily, Ellis taking his usual long hot shower after work. I'd just set the last plate in the rack when his phone left casually on the granite island, lit up with a soft buzz. The screen glowed in the dim light. Last night meant everything to me. My hand froze mid-wipe. The dish towel dangled from my fingers. I stared at those words, simple black text on a white background from an unknown number. My heart didn't race at first. It just stopped. Then it thudded hard once, twice, like it was catching up to reality. I don't snoop. I never have. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. I picked up the phone. His passcode was still our wedding date. Pathetic how easy it was. I opened the messages. Just enough to see the thread. Enough to know. My thumbs moved before my brain could stop them. I typed back, "Come over. She's gone." I hit send. The regret hit instantly, a cold wave down my spine, but the message was already gone delivered. I placed the phone exactly where I'd found it and stood there listening. The shower water continued its rhythm. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed low and steady. 12 minutes. I counted everyone. I lowered myself onto the bar stool, hands folded in my lap. My reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger, calm face, steady eyes. Inside, my thoughts spun in tight circles. Who is she? How long? Why tonight? But I didn't cry. I didn't call upstairs. I just waited. The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the house like a blade. I walked to the front door, smoothing my sweater, and opened it. Colette Vance stood on my porch. 49, elegant even in the porch light, wearing a tailored coat and subtle makeup that said she hadn't come by accident. Her face paled when she saw me. "Where is Ellis?" The words hung between us. I stepped aside. "Come in." She hesitated only a second before crossing the threshold, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and floral, filled the entryway. It was familiar in a way that turned my stomach. I closed the door behind her with a quiet click. We stood in the living room, neither of us sitting. The silence stretched. Upstairs, the shower stopped. Footsteps moved across the bathroom floor. Ellis came down the stairs, hair still damp, wearing a gray t-shirt and joggers. He reached the landing and froze. His eyes flicked from me to Colette and back. No explosion of shock, just a flicker of something calculated surprise that I was there witnessing this. "Maren," he started, voice low. I didn't answer him. I watched Colette instead. The way she glanced at him, a silent exchange passing between them. They weren't scrambling for excuses. They had been here before, in this moment in their minds at least. The realization settled over me like frost. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This had been building quietly right under my roof. Ellis descended the last steps. "This isn't what it looks like." Colette touched her necklace, composing herself. "We should talk like adults, Maren. All of us." I studied them both. The careful distance they kept, the way their eyes met for support. My voice came out even almost gentle. "How long have you both been waiting for me to step aside?" The question landed. Ellis shifted his weight. Colette's lips pressed together. For the first time, neither had an immediate reply. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked louder in the quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The steam from Ellis's shower still lingered faintly in the air, mixing with Colette's perfume and the remnants of our family dinner. Everything ordinary now poisoned. I felt the weight of the house around me, the photos on the walls, the kids' old trophies on the shelf, the life I had poured into these rooms. Colette started to speak again, something about misunderstandings, but I raised one hand slightly. Not commanding, just enough. Ellis was in the shower. Then his phone lit up. "And now you're here." Ellis ran a hand through his damp hair. "Marin, please, let's not make this harder." I met his eyes, those familiar blue eyes that had once looked at me with promise. "I'm not making it harder, Ellis. I'm just not making it easy for you anymore." The words hung there. Colette glanced toward the door, clearly wanting to leave but trapped by the moment. When she finally moved to go, she brushed past the side table and a small envelope slipped from her coat pocket onto the floor. She didn't notice. I waited until the door closed behind her. Then I bent down and picked it up. Inside was a printed sheet about a lakeside condo registered to some unfamiliar company. My fingers tightened on the paper. Ellis stood there, still damp from the shower that had started all of this. For the first time in years, I looked at my husband and didn't recognize the man staring back. Ellis closed the front door after Colette left the latch clicking like a period at the end of a sentence I never wanted to read. The house felt smaller, the walls closer. I stood in the living room with the envelope still in my hand, its edges sharp against my palm. He turned to face me, water still beating on his neck from the shower. "This isn't what you think," he said, the words coming out practiced, almost rehearsed. "Colette and we've been talking. That's all." I didn't move. The grandfather clock kept its steady rhythm, marking seconds that felt heavier now. I could still smell her perfume lingering near the door, mixing with the faint scent of his shampoo. "Talking," I repeated, tasting the word. It felt too small for what I had seen in their eyes. Colette's car hadn't pulled away yet. I heard the engine idle outside before it finally drove off. Ellis stepped closer, hands open like he was approaching a startled animal. "We should sit down. Talk like adults." "Adults," I echoed, the same word Colette had used. They really had coordinated their lines. I folded the envelope and slipped it into my sweater pocket. "How long have you two been preparing for this conversation?" He hesitated, glancing toward the stairs as if the kids might suddenly appear, even though Nolan was across the state and Briar was away at school. "A few months. It just happened. Work stuff turned into more. But our marriage has been dead for a while, Marin. You know that." The words landed like stones in still water. I searched his face for guilt, for shame. There was discomfort, yes, but no real surprise, no panic. They had already built their story together, brick by careful brick. I thought of all the late nights he'd blamed on projects, the weekends Colette had shown up at church events with that polished smile, always asking the right questions about our family. She knows things I said quietly. Where I visit my mother on Wednesdays. That Briar's dorm is 2 hours away. Even which side of the bed you sleep on now. My voice stayed level, but inside the pieces clicked together with painful clarity. This wasn't just stolen moments. Colette had been invited into the edges of our life. Into my life. Ellis rubbed the back of his neck, a familiar gesture when he was cornered. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Colette's been a friend to both of us. She lost her husband. She understands what it's like when things get routine. Routine." I let the word sit. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and drank it slowly. The cool liquid grounded me. He followed, hovering near the island where his phone still lay innocently. "How long have you both been waiting for me to step aside?" The question silenced him again. He opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment the mask slipped. I saw the calculation there, the man who had already imagined this new chapter without me in it. "We didn't plan to hurt you," he finally said. "But people change, Marin. Maybe it's time we faced that." I set the glass down carefully. No slamming, no tears, just the quiet weight of knowing. "I'm not making this harder for you, Ellis. I'm just refusing to make it easy." He tried another angle, voice softening. "Let's not do this tonight. The kids don't need to know. We can figure it out privately." His eyes flicked to my pocket where the envelope rested. He didn't know I had it. Not yet. I thought about our son Nolan, 24, and building his own life, and Briar, 19, and finally finding her footing away from home. The idea of dragging them into this mess made my chest tighten, but something else steadied me. The truth. I needed to understand how deep this went before I decided what to do with it. Ellis reached for me, a tentative hand on my arm. I stepped back. His touch, once comforting, now felt like a transaction. "You're emotional," he murmured. "I get it. But we've built a life here. Don't throw it away over one mistake." One mistake. The phrase echoed Colette's careful tone earlier. They had their narrative locked in the distant wife, the lonely widower, the inevitable drift. I almost laughed at how neatly it wrapped their choices. Instead, I looked at him, the damp hair, the familiar jawline, the man I had shared meals and beds and decades with, and felt a strange detachment settling in. "Go to bed, Ellis," I said. "We both need rest." He lingered, searching my face for the explosion he expected. When it didn't come, he climbed the stairs slowly. I waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled out the envelope again. The lakeside condo details stared back at me under the kitchen light. A property listing, deposit notes, a future being built without me. I sat at the island phone in hand and stared at the blank screen. My mind moved methodically now past the initial shock. This was bigger than infidelity. They had been planning, waiting. The thought should have broken me. Instead, it sharpened something deep inside resolve, cold and clear. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a stage where the final act had just begun, and I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. The next morning arrived gray and quiet, the kind of Michigan autumn day that promised rain but held back. I made coffee like always, the grinder's hum filling the kitchen while Ellis moved upstairs dressing for work. He came down, tie slightly crooked, and kissed my cheek out of habit. I let him. My face stayed neutral as he grabbed his keys and left. The door shut behind him with a soft finality. Only then did I move. I started with our shared finances on the laptop at the kitchen table. Login after login, account after account. At first, the transfers looked innocent, small amounts wired regularly to something called Vance Harbor Consulting. Ellis had mentioned it once, a tax consultant Colette recommended. Helps with the business deductions, he'd said casually over dinner months ago. I'd nodded then, trusting him. Now I dug deeper. The company linked back to Colette, her signature on filings, her address. The payments weren't huge but consistent enough to matter. Joint account money, our money. I screenshot everything, heart steady but mind racing through the implications. Up in Ellis's home office, the room smelled of paper and faint leather from his chair. I went through the drawers methodically, not rushing. That's when I found the folder. Inside were printouts of the lakeside condo, the same details from the envelope Colette dropped. Deposit schedules, a draft separation agreement dated weeks earlier, lists of our assets neatly divided in Ellis's handwriting, and a handwritten note that stopped me cold. Marin will resist at first. Wait until Briar leaves for school. My fingers traced the ink. The date matched Briar's move-in day at college. They had timed this, not just an affair, a calculated exit strategy that left me vulnerable, kids gone, finances, quietly drained, narrative already shaped. The betrayal sank deeper, but I didn't cry. I photographed every page with my phone, careful angles, clear lighting. Evidence. That's what mattered now. I sat in his chair for a long moment, staring at the note. The office window overlooked our backyard, the maple tree we planted when Nolan was small. Memories tried to surface, but I pushed them down. Not now. Feeling it fully would come later. Right now I needed clarity. I called Nadine Mercer. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and no nonsense as always. "Marin, you sound off. What's going on?" I told her everything, the message Colette at the door, the folder, the note. No tears, just facts. Nadine listened without interrupting, the way only a woman who'd survived her own ugly divorce could. "Men like Ellis don't fear tears," she said when I finished. "They fear paperwork. Don't confront him yet. Document everything. And whatever you do, don't leave the house." Her practicality anchored me. We talked for 20 minutes. She shared how she'd learned the hard way about hidden accounts and smooth-talking husbands. By the end, she gave me a name. Hollis Reed. Family law guy in town. Old school but sharp. "Tell him I sent you. He doesn't do drama, he does strategy." Does. I thanked her and hung up. The house felt different now, less like a sanctuary, more like a chessboard. I made copies of the documents on our home printer, tucked originals back exactly as I found them. Small victories in small details. Later that afternoon, Briar called from school. Her voice was light excited about a new class. "Dad texted me yesterday," she said casually. "Asked if I'd be upset if Mom moved closer to Grandma. Said you two might need space or something. Everything okay?" The floor tilted under me. I gripped the phone tighter. Ellis was already planting seeds, rewriting the story with the kids. "We're figuring some things out, honey," I said, keeping my tone even. "Focus on your studies. I love you." After we hung up, I stood at the kitchen window again. The rain had finally started, soft drops streaking the glass. I thought about the man who once carried me over the threshold of this house, who coached Nolan's soccer team, who held Briar through her first heartbreak. That man felt distant, now replaced by someone capable of cold planning. But I wasn't helpless. Nadine's words echoed paperwork. Protection first. I forwarded the key photos to a secure email and made an appointment with Hollis Reed for the following day. Ellis came home that evening with flowers, white roses, my favorite once upon a time. He set them on the counter with a gentle smile. "I hate how last night went. I still care about you, Maren. We can work through this." I accepted the flowers and arranged them in a vase. My hands moved steadily. "Thank you," I said simply. But I saw it for what it was, damage control, not remorse. He watched me searching for cracks. I gave him none. That night as he slept in our bed, I lay awake on the edge, listening to his breathing. The lakeside condo papers haunted my thoughts. The note about waiting for Briar. They had turned our life into a timeline, a transaction. I wouldn't let them write the ending. I met Hollis Reed the next afternoon in his modest office downtown. The waiting room smelled of coffee and old books. At 58, Hollis had a calm, measured presence, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the kind of steady gaze that made you believe he had seen every version of this story before. He didn't offer false sympathy or dramatic promises. "Do you want revenge?" he asked after reviewing the documents I'd brought, "or do you want protection?" "Both," I answered without hesitation. "But protection first." He nodded, flipping through the photos on my tablet. "Smart. Using joint funds for this Vance Harbor consulting could work in your favor during division of assets. The premeditation, the note about waiting for your daughter to leave shows intent. That strengthens your position." Hollis laid out the immediate steps clearly. "Back up everything. Photograph more. Stay in the house. Don't sign anything. Don't reveal how much I knew. Play the long game, Mrs. Whitlock. Let him think you're still processing. The more he relaxes, the more he'll slip." I left his office with a folder of notes and a clearer head. The drive home felt different. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was preparing. Ellis tried his new approach that evening. He came home early with takeout from my favorite Italian place. "I've been thinking," he said as we sat at the table. "Maybe we've both been unhappy. But I still care about you, Maren. Deeply." I twirled pasta on my fork, nodding slowly. His words sounded sincere enough for someone who didn't know I'd met with a lawyer hours earlier. "It's a lot to take in," I replied. Inside, I noted every careful phrase, every attempt to rewrite us as two people who had simply drifted. The next few days followed a pattern. Flowers, coffee in bed, mentions of old memories, damage control wrapped in concern. I accepted it all with quiet grace, offering little in return. Each night I added new observations to my private notes, the way he checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the sudden interest in my mother's health. Then, Briar called again. "Dad asked me yesterday if I thought you'd be happier closer to Grandma," she said, voice uncertain. "He made it sound like you were the one thinking about moving." "Mom, is something wrong?" The manipulation stung, but I kept my voice warm. "We're working through some grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Your dad and I have been together a long time. Don't worry, focus on your classes." After the call, I sat in the quiet kitchen and felt the full weight of it. Ellis wasn't just leaving, he was trying to make me the one who left, painting me as the unstable one, the one who needed space. The strategy was cruel in its patience. I met Hollis again for a follow-up. He reviewed my new documentation and approved. "You're doing this right. Stay put. Gather more if you can. When the time comes, we'll be ready." Ellis's mask showed small cracks as the week wore on. He grew restless when I didn't argue or cry. One evening he found me reviewing old photo albums deliberately. "Remember that trip to the cabin?" he asked, sitting beside me. "I remember," I said softly. But I closed the album before he could steer the conversation. The old memories no longer softened me the way they once might have. They felt like pages from someone else's book now. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, I stood in the doorway of Briar's empty room. Her posters still hung on the walls, a few stuffed animals on the bed. Ellis had been willing to wait until she was gone to upend everything. The thought hardened my resolve further. I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting the truth before he could rewrite it completely. Hollis's words stayed with me. Sometimes the room matters more than the argument. I needed the right moment, the right audience. Ellis came up behind me in the hallway. "You've been quiet lately." I turned and met his eyes. "Just thinking." He searched my face, looking for the woman who used to forgive easily. He wouldn't find her. Not this time. I had the evidence. I had the plan. And for the first time since that message lit up his phone, I felt something close to control returning. 1 week later, the anniversary dinner for Ellis's company arrived like an inevitable storm. 30 years of his small manufacturing business, celebrated at the local country club with colleagues, friends, church members, and family. Nolan had driven in from out of state, and Briar came home for the weekend. Ellis insisted I attend. "We need to show a united front," he said that morning, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "For the business, for the kids." I agreed quietly. Inside, I knew this was the room Hollis had spoken about. I prepared carefully. A simple black dress pearls Ellis had given me on our 20th anniversary. In my clutch, I carried a thin envelope containing the most damning pieces, screenshots of the messages, bank transfer records, the lakeside condo listing, and a scanned copy of that handwritten note. Not everything, just enough. The club ballroom glittered with chandeliers and autumn centerpieces. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the air. I moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on how lovely the event looked. Colette was there, of course, officially as an event consultant. She wore a deep burgundy dress, her hair swept up elegantly. Our eyes met across the room. She offered a polite nod. I returned it without warmth. Ellis stayed close to me most of the evening, his hand occasionally resting on my lower back. A performance for the audience. Nolan and Briar seemed relieved to see us together. "You two look good," Nolan said during cocktails. I smiled and said nothing. When dinner was served, Ellis took the stage for his speech. The room quieted. He looked every bit the successful, grateful husband, tall, distinguished, confident. 30 years, he began, voice warm through the microphone. I couldn't have done it without the support of my incredible wife, Maren. She stood by me through every challenge. Applause rippled through the room. I sat at our table, hands folded, feeling the weight of the envelope in my lap. Colette stood near the side, smiling like a woman who had already won. Ellis continued building momentum. "We've had our share of ups and downs like any long marriage. Sometimes life asks us to make brave changes, to step into new chapters with grace and honesty." The words landed precisely. Brave changes, new chapters. I saw a few people exchange knowing glances. The narrative was already spreading quietly, tastefully. The Whitlocks were separating amicably, mature adults making civilized choices. Ellis was positioning himself as the thoughtful one moving forward. My pulse remained steady. I glanced at Nolan and Briar. They looked confused but hopeful. Colette's smile deepened slightly. Ellis wrapped up to more applause. As he stepped away from the microphone, he glanced at me with something like relief. The performance was going well. I stood up. The chair scraped softly against the floor. Conversations dipped. Eyes turned toward me. Ellis paused, mid-step, surprise flickering across his face. I walked to the front, envelope in hand, my heels measured on the polished wood. The room grew still, expectant. This wasn't on the program. I stopped at the microphone. For a moment, I simply looked out at the faces, people we had known for years, neighbors, business partners. Then I spoke, voice clear and calm. "Before my husband talks about brave changes, I said I think everyone here should know who has really been planning them." The silence deepened. Ellis took a half step forward, but I continued. I'm not here to make a scene. I'm here to share the truth. I opened the envelope and held up the first page, briefly the bank records. Joint funds transferred to a company tied to Colette Vance. I set it down and lifted another. A lakeside condo they've been viewing together. Another page. And this note in my husband's handwriting, Marin will resist at first. Wait until Briar leaves for school. Gasps rippled through the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The document spoke clearly enough. Colette had gone pale near the side wall. Ellis's face tightened, his hand clenching at his side. I don't expect this room to choose sides tonight, I said, meeting eyes with old friends. I just need it to remember what actually happened. Nolan stood slowly at our table, staring at his father. Briar's eyes were wide, filling with tears. The weight of the moment pressed down on all of us. Ellis moved toward the microphone. Marin is emotional right now, he said, forcing a concerned smile. This is a private matter, no, Ellis, I interrupted evenly, still holding the microphone. I was emotional last week. Tonight I'm documented. The room stayed frozen. Cameras that had been recording the speeches continued rolling. I stepped back from the mic, leaving the envelope on the stand. The truth was out. Not all of it, but enough. Colette slipped toward the exit. Nadine, who had come as my guest, moved subtly to block her path with a quiet word I couldn't hear. I returned to my seat. The applause from earlier had died completely. In its place was stunned silence, and the low murmur of voices beginning to process what they had just witnessed. Ellis stood alone near the stage, the confident mask finally cracked. For the first time, he looked like a man who no longer controlled the story. The silence in the ballroom felt alive, pressing against my skin. I sat back down at our table, the envelope now on the podium behind me like an accusation no one could ignore. Heads turned between Ellis and me, whispers spread like cracks across ice. Ellis recovered enough to reach for the microphone again. Everyone, please. Marin has been under a lot of stress. This is not the time or place. I didn't stand up this time. I simply spoke from my seat, voice carrying in the quiet room. The documents are there for anyone who wants to see them. Transfers from our joint account, the condo they picked out together. The plan to wait until our daughter was away at school before pushing me out. Nolan rose fully now, his chair pushing back loudly. Dad, is this true? Ellis's mouth opened, but no smooth answer came. Briar sat beside her brother, tears slipping down her cheeks. You asked me if Mom was moving to Grandma's, she said, voice small but clear. You made it sound like it was her idea. The room watched the family unravel in real time. I felt no triumph, only a heavy sadness mixed with relief. This was the cost of truth. Ellis tried again, stepping closer to the mic. We can discuss this privately, as a family. No, I said calmly. You chose this room to talk about brave changes. Now the room knows what those changes actually looked like. Colette had reached the side exit. Nadine stepped smoothly into her path, not touching her, just standing there with quiet authority. Leaving won't make the paperwork disappear, Colette. Colette's face flushed. She glanced back at Ellis, but he was too busy trying to salvage the moment to help her. For the first time, their coordinated story had no response prepared. I stood once more, but only to address the room with finality. I don't need anyone here to choose sides. I just need you all to remember the truth. The rest will be handled privately the way it should have been from the start. Ellis finally reached the podium and gripped the mic. His knuckles were white. Marin, this is humiliating. For all of us. I looked at him directly. Humiliating is finding out your husband and his mistress have been planning your exit while you're still sleeping in the same house. This is just clarity. The words landed without venom. Just fact. Nolan walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. Briar followed, wiping her eyes. Their support in that moment meant more than I could express. Around us, guests began murmuring, some standing to leave, others staying to process. Phones were out. The story would spread, but on my terms this time. Ellis stood alone in the center of the stage area, the spotlight still on him from his earlier speech. The confident businessman who had built a company from nothing now looked small, lost. For the first time in our marriage, he had no control over the narrative. No prepared lines, no quiet agreement from me to keep things smooth. Colette slipped out a side door when Nadine stepped aside. I didn't stop her. She wasn't the main problem anymore. As the crowd slowly dispersed, a few longtime friends approached me with quiet words of support. Others avoided eye contact, unsure how to navigate the sudden fracture. I understood. Change this sharp leaves everyone unsteady. Ellis finally stepped down and walked toward me. His face was pale. We need to talk. At home. I gathered my clutch. We will. But not tonight. Tonight the kids and I are going to process what just happened. Nolan drove us home, Briar and me. The car was quiet except for the hum of the engine and the occasional sniffle from the back seat. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade. The house was dark when we arrived. I made tea for Briar and sat with both children in the living room. We didn't rehash every detail, we simply sat together. Nolan apologized for not seeing the signs earlier. Briar hugged me tightly and whispered, "You didn't embarrass us, Mom." He did. Their words settled something deep inside me. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning of healing. Upstairs, I paused at the doorway to our bedroom. Ellis's things were still there, but the space already felt foreign. I thought back to the shower, running the phone, lighting up Colette at the door. The chain of moments that led here. In the quiet of the house with my children safe downstairs, I allowed myself one long, slow breath. Ellis no longer controlled the story. And for the first time in weeks, neither did the fear. The days after the anniversary dinner moved slowly, like waking from a long, disorienting dream. Ellis sent text after text asking to talk. Colette emailed a long, carefully worded apology that somehow still cast her as the misunderstood party. I read them once, then forwarded the relevant ones to Hollis. No replies from me, not yet. I met with Hollis again early the following week. We began the formal process, protective orders for the finances, petitions for temporary arrangements. He reminded me to keep moving forward methodically. "You don't have to destroy him," he said. "Just make sure the truth does its work." That felt right. I wasn't interested in revenge that left me bitter. I wanted freedom from the weight I had been carrying for far too long. Nolan came by the house a few evenings later. We sat on the back porch as the leaves turned deeper shades of red and gold. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, staring into his coffee. "I thought you were just being distant lately." I didn't see what Dad was doing. I reached over and squeezed his hand. None of us saw the full picture until we had to. That's okay. We see it now. Briar stayed a few extra days before returning to school. One afternoon, she found me in the kitchen reorganizing the pantry, an old habit when my mind needed order. She wrapped her arms around me from behind and rested her chin on my shoulder. "You didn't embarrass us," she whispered again. He did. "I'm proud of you for staying calm." I don't know if I could have. Her words healed something I hadn't realized was still raw. We cried a little then, not from pain but from release. Mother and daughter standing together in the same kitchen where that first message had appeared. I returned to the places that had started it all. The bathroom where Ellis had been showering. The counter where his phone had lit up. The front door where Colette had stood expecting an empty house. Each spot felt smaller now, less powerful. I stood in the steam of my own shower one morning and let the hot water run over my shoulders, washing away the constant tension I had normalized for years. I had stopped carrying the need to make myself smaller to keep the peace. Stopped carrying the fear that speaking up would break everything. The truth had already broken what needed breaking. What remained was space for me, for my children, for whatever came next. Ellis moved out 2 weeks later. The divorce would take time, but the lines were drawn clearly. He looked older when he loaded the last box into his car. Part of me still mourned the man I had married, but I no longer mourned the version he had become. On a quiet evening, I stood at the kitchen window again. The house was mine, in a way it hadn't been in years. Not because of victory, but because of honesty. Sometimes the doorbell doesn't bring the person who ruins your life. Sometimes it brings the truth you were finally ready to face. If this story stayed with you, tell me where you're listening from. And if you've ever had to stay calm while your whole life changed, know you're not alone. I want to know how you're doing. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. We have many more stories like this waiting, real, raw, and hopeful. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Let's keep walking through these moments together.